Who really killed Dr. Evelyn Hart? Dive into the chilling web of lies, betrayal, and manipulation, where everyone has a motive, but no one has the truth. Watch as Detective Miles Grayson unravels the perfect alibi, a case so twisted it will leave you questioning everything. If you think you've figured it out, think again. The final twist will blow your mind. Don't miss this gripping thriller. Subscribe now for more mind-bending mysteries and hit the bell to uncover the truth behind the untold crimes. The rain fell in steady sheets over the city of New Orleans, a city known for its music, mysteries, and shadows. On the 15th floor of an upscale penthouse, the night turned deadly. Dr. Evelyn Hart, the city's most celebrated heart surgeon, was sprawled across the gleaming marble floor, a scalpel buried in her chest. Her lifeless body, framed by the flickering city lights, seemed almost staged, a macabre work of art. Detective Miles Grayson arrived at the scene, his coat soaked, his eyes sharp despite his fatigue. He was a man who lived for the unsolvable, the cases that defied logic. And this one? It screamed impossible. The penthouse was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry, no footprints on the thick carpet, no prints on the weapon. The sheer precision of the crime was chilling, as if the killer had been rehearsing for years. Grayson crouched near the body, studying the scalpel. A surgeon's tool for saving lives now turned into an instrument of death. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a masterpiece of calculation. He stood looking out at the rain-soaked city. This wasn't just a murder, he muttered. This was a message. Within hours, the victim's life unraveled like a sinister thread. Her death had drawn out an eclectic mix of suspects, each with a motive as sharp as the scalpel that killed her. Lauren Page, Evelyn's estranged sister, stood near the police tape, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her art career had crumbled under the weight of Evelyn's shadow. Evelyn had blackballed her from galleries, ensuring no one dared to display her work. "She always wanted me to fail," Lauren said bitterly. "Even in death, she wins." Dr. Victor Moreau, Evelyn's former colleague, arrived with an air of forced composure. His career had collapsed under accusations of malpractice, accusations Evelyn had orchestrated. "I lost everything because of her," he admitted through clenched teeth. "Everything." Kyle Rivers, her ex-fiancé, stood in the corner, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding Grayson's. Their breakup had been public and vicious, ending in financial ruin for him. "You think I killed her?" he scoffed. "I wouldn't give her the satisfaction." Sarah Grant, Evelyn's assistant, was a picture of sorrow, her hands trembling as she spoke. "She was like family," she whispered, but her tone was hollow. Behind her grief, Grayson sensed something darker. Each of them had motive. Each of them had anger festering beneath their skin. But there was one problem. Each one had an alibi that was impossible to crack. The alibis seemed as solid as steel. Lauren had been at an art gallery surrounded by witnesses. Grayson interviewed them all, but while they confirmed her presence, there was a gap, a short period where she had slipped away. Victor was at a medical conference. CCTV footage showed him mingling with attendees. Yet Grayson noticed his GPS ping briefly near Evelyn's penthouse. Kyle had been at home, his neighbors complaining about loud music blasting from his apartment. Grayson couldn't shake the feeling that the timing of the music was too convenient, as if it had been deliberately staged. Sarah's alibi was perhaps the most convincing. A video call with a friend, time-stamped to the exact time of the murder. But Grayson couldn't ignore the subtle unease in her voice when he questioned her. The pieces didn't fit. Grayson paced his office, studying the suspects' files. "How can they all have motives," he murmured, "and yet none of them be guilty?" Grayson's breakthrough came when he began digging into Evelyn's life. What he found was a woman who didn't just make enemies, she cultivated them. In a hidden room behind Evelyn's desk, Grayson found her greatest secret, a meticulous collection of files. Each file was a portrait of destruction, containing blackmail, threats, and evidence of manipulation. Lauren's artistic failures, Evelyn had ensured they happened. Victor's malpractice scandal, Evelyn had whispered in the right ears to destroy his reputation. Kyle's financial ruin, Evelyn had weaponized their breakup to leave him in shambles. Even Sarah, her loyal assistant, wasn't spared. Grayson discovered embezzlement records. Sarah had stolen from Evelyn, and Evelyn had been preparing to expose her. She didn't just create enemies, Grayson muttered, flipping through the files. She made sure they stayed enemies. Grayson stared at the files spread out before him, the damning secrets Evelyn had hoarded to control everyone around her. But something wasn't adding up. Evelyn had created these enemies, yes, but she had also orchestrated their alibis. Why? What kind of victim ensures their killers have perfect excuses? He pored over her last moves. Security logs from the penthouse revealed something unusual. Evelyn had scheduled private appointments with each of the suspects in the weeks leading up to her death. It was as though she had been pulling them closer, tightening the strings. Then it hit him. Evelyn wasn't just paranoid. She was baiting them. She had engineered her own murder to force her enemies into the spotlight, to leave them flailing as they fought to clear their names. But Evelyn's game had backfired. Someone had used her elaborate plan to make her own murder real. Grayson's hand trembled as he reached for his phone. "Run every detail of those alibis again," he barked to his team. "There's something in the timing. Someone wasn't where they were supposed to be." Sarah Grant sat across from Grayson, her demeanor polished, her voice steady. "I was on a video call with my best friend. We talked for almost an hour," she said, her tone rehearsed. "You can check the timestamps?" And Grayson had checked. On the surface, the call was airtight, complete with a time-stamped video file, but something about it felt too perfect. He replayed the footage for the 10th time, studying every frame. That's when he saw it, a faint reflection in the glass cabinet behind Sarah. Her hand moved to tuck her hair behind her ear, but in the reflection, her hand stayed still. Grayson's heart quickened. The call wasn't live, it was pre-recorded. A deep dive into Sarah's digital records revealed even more. She had created the video weeks before Evelyn's death. Sarah had planned for this moment, knowing it would absolve her of suspicion. Grayson leaned back in his chair, the realization chilling. Sarah hadn't just covered her tracks, she'd anticipated the investigation. But why? Because she was in the penthouse, he whispered to himself, and she wasn't alone. The interrogation room was dimly lit, a single bulb casting sharp shadows on Sarah's face. Grayson sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "Let's skip the formalities," he began. "I know you were there that night. The video call was a fake." Sarah's eyes widened for the briefest moment before her lips curled into a cold smile. "You're good, detective, but a fake call doesn't prove anything." Grayson leaned forward. "It proves you weren't where you said you were, and the surveillance footage proves you entered the penthouse shortly before Evelyn's time of death." Sarah's facade cracked. "I didn't kill her," she hissed. "I didn't have to." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "She knew it was coming," Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and triumph. "Evelyn thought she controlled everything, but she couldn't see how much everyone hated her. Kyle was the one who snapped. I just let it happen." Grayson's pulse quickened. "You let it happen?" "You staged the scene, cleaned the weapon, and left a scalpel by her body. That's more than letting it happen. That's playing God." Grayson knew Sarah was manipulating him, but her words left a trail of doubt. He pulled Kyle Rivers into a separate interrogation room where the man sat hunched over, his hands shaking. "She pushed me too far," Kyle blurted out before Grayson could speak. "She ruined me, took everything. I didn't mean to. I just lost control." Kyle's confession filled in the missing pieces. Evelyn had taunted him that night, flaunting her power over him until his anger boiled over. But Kyle wasn't smart enough to cover his tracks. That was Sarah's doing. Grayson returned to Sarah, his voice sharp. "You cleaned up his mess and made it look like the perfect crime. You used Evelyn's own paranoia against her. But you weren't the killer. You were the mastermind." Sarah leaned back in her chair, her calm demeanor returning. "And yet here I am, detective. No blood on my hands. Just a perfectly timed video call and a dead woman who deserved every second of it." Grayson stood, his fist clenched. "You won't walk away from this." But Sarah only smiled. "Evelyn died because she underestimated me. Don't make the same mistake, detective." Sarah was charged with evidence tampering and conspiracy. Kyle faced a second-degree murder charge, but Grayson couldn't shake the feeling that justice hadn't been served. Evelyn's death wasn't just a murder, It was the collapse of a carefully constructed empire. In her quest to control her enemies, she had set the stage for her own destruction. As Grayson stood in the penthouse one last time, the rain drumming against the windows, he thought about Sarah's parting words. Evelyn had underestimated her, and now Sarah was free to start over. Her slate clean, her secrets buried. In this game of power and revenge, Evelyn might have been the first to die.
But Grayson knew she wouldn't be the last. When the truth becomes a weapon, no one escapes unscathed.